I don't even have to move to face her, you know. That's one of the things that's nice about the Alchemist for purposes of Night Rebels farming, especially the key farming instance, is you don't have to face your targets to hit them. An Alchemist caster does not suffer from, you know, failing spells due to not facing your target. If you like to play casters, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. And sometimes that mechanic in the game can be horribly frustrating because there are situations where, you know, maybe a mob started in your area of view that's considered you're facing the target, but they move slightly out of it and then you fail the spell, or they're directly in front of you and you're like, what's going on? He's directly in front of me. How in the world can I fail this spell? Or some other wonky ridiculousness where you're like, he's right there. What do you mean I've failed the spell? You know, it's so terribly frustrating. And I wish they would do away with the facing mechanic for all spells, like they have done with the Alchemists, and Artificers are the same way. It doesn't matter, as long as you have your spell, your target hard targeted, your spell will hit it. Your spell vibe will go backwards, sideways, whatever. Now, I have a little example that I like to show to help you understand facing mechanics. Okay. And this involves really, really high-tech stuff here. This program is called Paint. It's super duper advanced. Okay. And I'm going to use Paint as an example. Okay. So we're going to say, let's do a black background here. And we're going to say that this circle is you. Okay, that's you. And I'm going to draw a cone. Oops. Let's make that smaller. I'm going to draw a cone here. Okay. This is a simplistic example, but you'll understand if you've been frustrated by the spell facing mechanics. This is going to help you understand some of the nuances, because sometimes you're like, the mob is right in front of me. Why am I failing spells? And this is something I encounter a lot because I like to play caster tanks. And so as a caster tank, I am directly in front of the mobs often, right? The mobs are right there. I want the aggro. They're directly in front of me and I'm casting spells at them. And all the time I say, you know, your spell failed because you're not facing. And he's like, he's right there. I can reach out and kiss him. How in the world could I not be facing this target? Well, that's what this little diagram is going to help you understand some of the nuances about the spell facing mechanics in DDO. So the circle is you, and the cone is your sort of field of view for purposes of what you're considered to be facing. Okay, so imagine that everything that's in this cone, right, you're facing. All right. You're facing, oops, that's a line. I don't want a line, I want a circle. Let's make it a thicker circle. You're facing that mob, and you're facing that mob, but you're not facing that mob, and you're not facing this mob. Okay, you are facing that mob, but you're not facing this mob. Okay? So anything within that code, the two purples and the blue, you could throw a target at and it would go off. But if you tried to target the red one, you could target it, but it would say you're not facing your target. Okay? But if let's say the blue one, you targeted it, you throw your spell, but the blue one moves to where the red one is before you're in your casting animation, right? And during your casting animation, the blue one moves to where the red one is, then it will say your spell failed because you're not facing your target. Even though it's clearly, like, you can see him, he's generally in front of you, but he's not in that cone. Okay? They got to be in that cone the whole time, otherwise your spell will fail because you're not facing your target. Now, when it comes to mobs that are really close to you, as you can see, the closer you get to you, that field that counts as you're facing your target gets smaller and smaller. Now, this may not be 100% accurate to what it actually is, but it's close enough to get you to understand the nuances of spell facing mechanics. Okay, so if we do the zoom and we zoom in on us, and we're going to zoom in closer. I hope the devs are watching, okay? Because this is hella frustrating. So we're going to zoom as much as we can zoom in on paint. Okay, if your target is directly in front of you, then your target, let's say like literally touching you, your target must occupy that pixel. There is 1 pixel that your target can occupy that you are considered facing. And if your target is 1 pixel to the left or 1 pixel to the right, then you're not facing it. And that's why you're like, wait a minute, he's right there in front of me. What in the world? It's because that cone of your facing is so small when it's in front of you. And that's why casters are often trying to back up and put some distance between their targets and themselves, beyond the fact that, you know, casters don't want to get hit and they don't want to be near mobs, but they also, experienced casters know that that field of view where you're considered facing is bigger if the mob is a little bit further away, whereas if they're directly in front of you, they got to be right there in that 1 little pixel right there. And if they're 1 pixel to the side, your spell fails, or it won't go off, or the 1 pixel to the other side. So you back up and the mob is, you know, out here. You can see there's a lot more room for side to sideness, and the further back you are, the more side to side movement you can have, you know, that's considered you are facing the target. It's the cone of sham. Yeah, it's so... I hate the spell facing mechanics in DDO. It's always been a point of frustration. I've been playing casters for 12 years, and it's maddening at times because you're like, because when you get, you know, your spell fails because you're not, and then you lose your spell points, you just want to like throw your keyboard across the room. You know, you're just cursing at the screen going, you know, I'm facing the target. What is the problem? It's because they were 1 pixel to the side. And, you know, remember that DDO, we were talking about this the other day, how DDO came out in like 1850 or something like that. And in 1850, they didn't have widescreen monitors, right? People were still using like cathode ray tube monitors. Like you were high speed if you had a 17-inch monitor in 2006, right? Some of you still were using like 15-inch monitors and stuff. Or you had a 21-inch, that was like amazing. Or if you even had a flat screen, it was probably pretty small. So in 2006, when this game came out, we didn't have the big, you know, 34-inch widescreen crap, you know, so you can see so much more compared to what you could back in the day. You know, your field of view in DDO back in the day was like this. Right? But now we can see so much more, which makes the spacing mechanics so much more frustrating because, oh, do I want to save that? I don't know. That is a masterpiece right there. I should print that out and sign it. I guess we'll let it go. So, you know, there's so much more on our screens right now, right? I mean, literally the field of view, like back in 2006, people were playing on little monitors, and it was like a quarter of what you're seeing now. Like just basically a window of what's in the middle is what a lot of players were seeing because we didn't have the big monitors back then. You know, and you just feel like, you know, when you're a caster, you know, you're like, you know, if I'm like over here, let's say, you know, I should be able to target that guy, you know, but if that guy was a mob and I was facing the way I'm facing, I wouldn't be able to throw a spell at him on other casters because it would say you're not facing him. You're like, he's right there, I can see him. But, you know, back in 1850 when this game came out, monitors weren't that wide, and he probably wouldn't even been on the monitor in 1850. So, you know, I would love to see them just do away with spell facing mechanics, and it's so liberating playing an alchemist because you don't have that. You know, if that was a mob, and I turned and turned away, he's off my screen, and I threw a spell at him, it would still shoot at him. Even though I'm totally not even facing him, he's off the screen, but because I still have him targeted on an alchemist, it'll still throw my spell vials at him, and it's delicious. And all spells should be that way. One of the reasons why it is especially frustrating to me, and probably a lot of you old-timey pen and paper folk, 'cause I'm an old pen and paper guy, is that there's nothing like that in pen and paper. In pen and paper, when you use your little figurines and you're in a square and stuff, you are considered facing whatever way you want. It doesn't matter literally which way your guy is turned. You know, it's always like, you know, if you could draw a line to your target, then you can hit him. And in your pen and paper days, you know, if your dungeon master ever looked at you and you know, it was your turn to go and you're like, I'm gonna finger death that dude, and your dungeon master was like, oh, your spell failed because you weren't facing your target, next player, like, your players would burn down your house. There would be a full-on riot, because ain't no pen and paper player would ever stand for that ridiculousness. There's nothing like that in DDO. I mean, in pen and paper, but in DDO, you've got these facing mechanics that are horribly restrictive. You know, it's as if my character can't turn his head to the side and go, oh, finger of death, fireball. You know, you shouldn't literally need to be having that real narrow cone that I just showed with MS Paint to be facing your target. So if spell facing mechanics ever confused you, hopefully that helped a little bit. This has been Spell Facing Rants by Uncle Voodoo. Thank you.